All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Plant Medicine for PTSD podcast. Joining me today is my friend Dave Morrow. This is a really cool one for me because Dave's actually a super successful podcaster in his own right, hosting the #1 Canadian military podcast. And it's actually very interesting. We didn't get into it on this episode. This is going to be part one of a two-parter since Dave is actually inside of our microdosing program right now. So I kind of wanted to cover all the territory pretty much leading up to him working with us, but we'll save everything about those experiences for part two once he's actually finished. But I bring up the interesting fact that he has a top podcast because one of the things that we've literally worked on is this sort of underlying negative self-talk kind of belief that nobody actually gives a shit what he has to say, despite the metrics showing that he has the #1 podcast in Canada. So clearly people give a shit what he has to say. So thank you in advance for listening to what Dave has to say. I actually think he has a really interesting story with pretty unique experiences overseas. He had a really interesting job in the Canadian military. And then, unfortunately, a pretty standard story of getting out and not getting the help that he needed. I also really appreciate Dave's honesty and vulnerability, sharing about a unique medical condition that you'll hear about right at the beginning as we get into it. So, without further ado, let's get into this episode. Well, dude, thank you very much for being here to discuss how plant medicine has helped you overcome the shame associated with having a micropenis. My audience is really excited to hear this one because I think there's a lot of people out there who struggle with having a micropenis, and
Dave,
seeing someone like yourself.
it takes a long time on the path to accept and just be an advocate, and that's what I'm here for, man. I mean, it
No,
just
dude,
makes
I think it's beautiful. And the fact that your wife is still with you after all this time.
and two kids. Let's not forget. So
I
guys,
know.
it's totally doable.
It
It's
still
totally
works.
doable.
And that's why I see you with your teeny tiny little mug. I think it helps to have other things that are really small to like put it in perspective. Like I'm sure you use
Yeah.
like the tiny mini hot sauce bottles, and you hold it up next to your micro penis and you're like, this is respectable.
It's cool when you end up finding like minds like yourself that have similarities. It's easy to bond. With individuals that have the same affliction. So like this is the whole point, right? We need to band together, like micro penis unite, and microdose. I mean, like these things kind of all go together. Like talking
That was
about
a flawless
synergies, and
transition.
that's what we're doing here. There's no such thing as coincidence. Micro penis, microdose. Right,
Incredible.
man.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So for real though, Dave, you are a Canadian veteran. You were an officer in the military, which I actually want to ask you about. I don't know if we've ever talked about those experiences. You have a podcast, the Hard to Kill podcast, #1 Canadian veteran podcast.
Yeah. Well, according to FeedSpot, which I don't know what that means, and a few other like random, I guess
So
AI
wait, is
generated.
that like #1 military podcast in Canada or #1 Canadian military podcast
This
in the
this sounds
world?
like assistant to the regional manager and assistant regional manager. So I'm going to look. Let's just run with it, man. Okay, so 2022 officially, I was the #1 military army veteran podcast,
Okay.
according to Broken Jarhead. They did their own thing, and like I had to like submit, and like it was legit. So
Okay.
that was 2022. Now recently, FeedSpot. I don't even know what FeedSpot is, but I saw it pop up. It's like, hey man, like you're #1 veteran podcast in Canada. So there's like 5. So like, okay, cool.
Nice.
And then there's another rating thing that said I'm like top 25 on the planet when it comes to military leadership podcasts. So
Okay.
24 more to
That's
go
pretty
to
legit.
Bob Jocko off that
Yeah,
mantle.
we'll get there.
But we're getting there. We're getting there.
Nah, I mean, either way, I didn't mean to take anything away from you. I just thought that was kind of funny. So we've got that. You are a published author of
Mhm.
Harden the Fuck Up. You're a dad of 2 kids. You've got a company that you may or may not still be coaching people for fitness and weight loss. We may or may not talk about that. And you are a client inside of our microdosing program.
Mhm.
So what I want to hear about first, because I've only really known you for the last, I forget even when we crossed paths, but the last couple of years, when you were
2023.
already very much on this path that you're on now, and obviously you've grown and changed since then. But I know that there were several iterations of your life that you went through before we ever got to know each other. So I kind of want to rewind the tape a little bit and start there because I really don't know much about, the influences that shaped you. I'm always kind of curious to hear like why somebody joined the military. I was just talking to a buddy of mine the other day, and I feel like if I had different influences as a kid, I definitely would have gone down that path because I was like super interested in it, really wanted to do it. But when I was growing up, it was always like, no, go to college, go to college, go to college. Like, you only join the military if you don't have options. Like, that was the kind of message that I heard as a kid, which I know is like not true. But talk to me about that. Let's start there. Like, why did you go into the military? What kind of influences brought you down that path?
Ego, money, glory. Like, I wish I had. Oh, I wanted to serve my country. Nah. Like later on, I did, but when I initially joined, the only influence I had was my grandfather, who I never got to meet
Hmm.
because he passed when I was like 3. But I heard stories through the family. He fought in the Second World War against the Italians. So that always fascinated me. I always was drawn to GI Joe and playing with like toy guns, and it just was a natural fit. So me and my best bro, we decided one day that when we saw the recruiting sergeant at our school. So college here is in Quebec is basically grade 11, grade 12. Grade 12, grade 13.
Okay.
Um, I was just like, okay, well, we can make $8,000. We can shoot guns, and for sure we'll end up with girlfriends after this, right? Right, for sure.
100%.
So we joined. That was it. It was as simple as that. But the thing was, when I joined, I didn't know what to expect. I freaking loved it because it was the first time that I had the challenge that I was looking for in terms of it was physical, it was mentally pretty tough, but also, especially in the early stages, I just did well because I knew how to just follow basic orders. Hey, do this at this time. Got it. What else do I have to do? Just wait out. Okay. Like I could play Simon Says all day, and I was relatively fit. So it just allowed me to excel. So I did well in my first set of courses. And because I had success, and I never really had success in anything else that was outside of the ordinary, is pretty average student, pretty average athlete, pretty average everything. I just felt like I had a new place that most people didn't join that I was actually good at. And I was just naturally good at shooting. I was just naturally good at all the things that an infantry grunt would be good at. And so it just allowed me to do a little bit more, take up leadership positions. And so I just loved it. And I said, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. And that was essentially it. And then eventually I got this like love of country. And I, so much so that I decided to deploy in 2010 to Afghanistan because I knew joining I had no illusions of thinking, oh, this is just going to be a job. Like it's marketed here in Canada. Like get a great job. It's not a fucking job, man. Like, you can go work at McDonald's if you want a job. It's way more than that. I knew I was going to go to war at some point. So that was my mindset. I'm not joining the army because I don't want to go to war. I want to go to war. So that was 2010 for me.
And so, I'm sorry, did you say you joined out of like you had already gone to university, or that's just what you call it in Quebec? Quebec seems like a whole other universe that has different
Yeah.
ways of
Yeah,
doing
no,
everything.
it's different than literally everywhere else in North America. So imagine we go to high school to grade 11. We
Okay.
don't have two different schools either. Like you go elementary school and then you go to high school, which is grade 7 to grade 11, all in the same school.
Okay.
And then you pop over to another school if you want, which is called CJEP. I don't even know what the acronym stands for, but it's college. It's what we call college here. It's paid for by the government. It's like $100 per semester to go. It's really, well, at least when I went. Maybe it's $1,000 now. I don't know. But the goal is you can pick like a trade, quasi trade, or you can pick like the pure and applied sciences, and then that funnels you. The goal is to like funnel you into the right track for your career, whether you want to go to the university route or you want to go more into like they do a 2-year kind of technical degree, if you want to
Okay.
call it
Got
that,
it. Got
to
it. Got
become
it.
like a police officer or a firefighter or somebody who works in aeronautical engineering. They have all those programs. So
Okay.
um,
But so it's not like you had, a 4-year university degree and then went and joined the military. This was before that.
it was before that. I still went and did my we call it the grenadier degree. That was the grenadier is my unit here in Montreal. It typically takes out of a 4-year degree, guys 7 years to finish. It took me 7 years to finish my degree, so it's just the way it is.
And so break that down for me what you said of, you joined kind of, I guess, knowing that you were going to go to war,
Yeah.
but you the way that you said it, it's almost like you made a decision that you were going to deploy later on. Was that like your decision?
Yeah.
Just the way you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
100%. The way Canada is so like, we're a confused country. We're confused on everything. We do everything so backwards, but it works in your favor if you know how to work the system. So
right.
I I always visualized going to war. I always wanted to deploy. But when you're a reservist, you have to fight for the position. You can't just go. During the global war on terror, guys are climbing over each other to get spots with what we call the Reg Force battalions, which is the full-time guys. So the cool thing is you get to pick your fight. I initially wanted to go to Bosnia. That was the only thing that was going on. Like, Afghanistan started exactly when I joined, but there was nothing for a reservist for years. And I wasn't able to get in on any of those tours. It was only when the Reg Force started getting tired because they were deploying like crazy. And then the insurgency started, and I was like, okay, all hands on deck. So I wanted to go to Bosnia, but I got my spot taken away because I was junior. So that was, my first kick at the can. And then I was still doing my degrees. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm this deep into my education. Let's just finish it and then I'll deploy. And that's what I did. So I finished my degrees, and then I had an opportunity to go as a sergeant with an amazing role. So I got to pick my job before I deployed, and my job was amazing. And like I said, Canada's kind of screwed up in most things, but it works out in your favor if you know how to work the system. Essentially, my role in any other country's army would have been a special forces role. I got to walk around by myself, in terms of, like, I was operating alone with the American military with a backpack full of money, going on operations all over Afghanistan, like with contracts, and being able to sign, like, $10,000-$20,000 deals, hire contractors, work with Canadian Special Forces, American Special Forces. But I was solo. Like, the Canadians give you so much responsibility, and to a reservist on top of that. So I had a blast, man. I had so much fun because I work well when I don't have oversight. So I don't have somebody breathing down my neck. Just tell me, what do I need to do? Win the war? I'm on it. And so that was it,
Dave
man.
Morrow's going to get it done.
So I single-handedly won the war. Well, I mean, after my tour, we left Afghanistan, so we wouldn't
There
have
you go.
left had we not won. So
How
essentially, you're welcome. Is
how
what I'm
did
trying to
you
say.
get into that position? Like, how did that become your job?
I had a friend at my unit that explained the role that fit perfectly with my personality. It's called, here in Canada, it's called CIMIC, stands for Civilian Military Cooperation. Now, in hindsight, I think it's completely retarded that the military has that job, because it's like the military was like, oh, we need to do the NGO role, but inside the military. So we need to help rebuild, reconstruct, build relationships, win the hearts and minds within the military. And at the surface level, it's like, that's a great idea. We should absolutely be doing that. But then when you get there, you're like, yeah, but we're at war. Like, we need to kill those guys. We need to blow this shit up. Why are we rebuilding? This doesn't make any sense. Like, you rebuild after the war's done. And it's because we were so confused as to what the mission actually was.
Right.
It made no sense. I was literally there when they killed Osama bin Laden, or allegedly killed Osama bin Laden, depending on what side of the fence of the conspiratorial spectrum you're on. And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, hey, Sergeant Major, like, let's get the fuck out of here, man. We won the war. Like, that's it. Let's go
Done.
home. He's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of judging by your tone. I'm thinking you're probably not on the same page. He's like, no, get back out there, get back on that chopper. But that to me was the moment I realized, oh, well, we don't really know why we're here, because that's why we started the war. It was this dude. And now we're still all here, but now he's dead. So why are we still here? So I was rebuilding schools, I was rebuilding roads, like little contracts here and there in the village, always out chatting with the population, essentially. Like, I was like fully embedded. I was learning Pashto, I was having dinner with them regularly, like going to their weddings. Like, it was like we called it going native. Like, I was, growing up, like, I was just like, man, I'm in their community. We literally lived in their community. So you build literal human connections. And I was a teacher on top of that. So I got to help rebuild a school, which is attached to our compound, which is incredible. But the only reason why I decided to pick that job was because my buddy at my unit did that job a tour or two before. And he's like, dude, it's the best job in the world. You get to go out on your own. You get a backpack full of money. I was like, oh, that's amazing. So I knew that job was available. And I just, when I resolved to do something, I realized I always end up getting it, and I'm patient. So I just waited for the spot to open up, and I just showed up and said, hey, I want this job. And they're like, okay, well, you have this course you need to do. Do you have it? I'm like, no. They're like, okay, take that course. And then one thing led to another, and that's how I got on tour.
When I talk to, or I should say, most of the people that I talk to who've experienced some kind of like traumatic things during their deployments, a lot of it is centered around losing friends or being in IED blasts, being in firefights, that kind of thing. But I also know that there's a lot of, I guess the term would be like moral injury from just like seeing fucked up
Mm,
things
mm, mm,
and experiencing, maybe your higher ups are supposed to be doing one thing and they're actually doing another. So, what kinds of things like that did you experience? Because it sounds like you weren't in this like combat role, but I imagine living with the native populace as you were, probably saw a whole other variety of fucked up things that kind of went against some of your morals, perhaps. So,
mm,
did you have any experiences like that that kind of fucked you up a little bit from
mm.
seeing them over there?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I was definitely in a combat role. So
Okay.
the weird thing was in my job that I was an infantry sergeant
Mm-hmm.
deploying. So my weapons handling, my movement uh, uh, capabilities, like over rough, like I understand tactics. I told the Americans on the ground before I like prove like I'm a in the States it's called E6. So but I've got, over a decade of training experience under my belt, which is way more than most American sergeants. But the difference is American sergeants have a lot of wartime. So I'm like, look, I'm gonna be here, but like I'm qualified this, that, and the other. Like I can take a section, I can take guys and put down suppressing fire. I can do everything that you guys can do plus plus plus, and patch guys up if need be, and work the radios and work all the weaponry. Like I am an infantry sergeant, but a lot of the people in my role weren't. A lot of people were like, they were, they were like, they were naval like warfare guys. They've been on ships, like, and they were patrolling on foot. It was really fucked up. I'm like, this is negligent. Like, you shouldn't have these guys on the ground here. But hey, the army makes the decision, so it wasn't my call. And so yeah, we're definitely in combat. Like, I was with the 171 Cav. I got my combat spurs. They wanted to give me the combat action badge, stuff like that. Like, so you know, we were in the fight, but I wanted to be in the fight. Like, I literally, that wasn't the thing that was going that really harmed me, because psychologically I prepared myself for warfare and bullets, bombs, IDs, all that stuff. That to me wasn't the thing that really was harmful. It was what you said, is the moral injury stuff. And it's the best way I got it described when I came back and I was just working on myself and trying to figure out, like, why am I so angry? Why can't I get over stuff? Like, it was, hey, you got outflanked. You got outflanked by something that you weren't expecting. You visualized, you prepared yourself for war. That is like the blood. Like, that's not what harms you. It's the stuff you weren't prepared for, and everybody's going to be different. And for me, it was kids that were part of like the schools that I was helping stand up. I was there almost every day. Like, I was literally building it with my bare hands to get it back up and running. I was going into the classes and helping them with English lessons, learning Pashto. The teachers were teachers just like me. And so I built a connection with these kids, and like we got them a playground, and like you heard joy for the first time. So like I knew all of these kids for months, and then the Taliban start planting IEDs. We get reports like, oh, where's this kid? Oh, he got blown up. Oh, fuck. And it's like, okay, well, who do we murder? Because like there's no law here. We're the law. So they're like, well, we're going to do our best, in the community to try and tell them to go fuck off. But could you do some more patrols and stuff? And so, but the Taliban are elusive. They're playing psychological warfare games, right? So they're basically telling the parents, like, send your kids to school, go ahead, but they're going to die. Well, parents are parents, doesn't matter where they are. And then, so that really got to me. but then it was the essay. I don't want to screw up your
Yep.
channel, but
Yep. No,
um,
I was
all
gonna
the
ask about that.
the abuses that uh like the video, like we had the videos. So it's like, hey, you know, talking to your chain of command, you're like, hey, I want to go murder like all the guys that are literally the leadership here in the village that we've been talking to for years. They're in on this, and like, what do we do here? Because I don't want to talk to them anymore. I want them to die. I know what they're doing to these boys. We have the videos, and it's like, well, not our country, not our rules. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't hold water, man. Like we go and we smash down their doors and send them off with like black hoods over their heads. Like, why can't we do something for this? Because this is wrong, and like these kids are getting sold into slavery. We know that. That crushed me. That absolutely crushed me. And I didn't realize how much it affected me because that was a fundamental wrong that I was not expecting to have to deal with. And just to try and like get a grip of that, because I just stuffed it all down. I'm like, well, yeah, they're right. Not my country, not my rules. But no, that was hard to do.
I I imagine there were times where it went even further than that, where you're asking your leadership, "Hey, can we go murder all these people?" And not only are they saying, "No, it's not our country, not my circus, not my monkey," kind of thing,
Yeah.
but sometimes it had to go further of like, "No, we actually need you to build strategic relationships with these people, and we need you to pay them off, or we
Yeah.
we have to engage this
Oh,
tribe for
100%.
this reason."
100%.
Yeah, dude, that had to be so fucking awful.
Yeah. Yeah. They were like the literal leadership.
Yeah.
So like they run the show in those small little villages. And you're like, huh. But it's like, oh, it's just their culture.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. But like these are the things that there was no forethought before we went in. Basically, the best way I had it described. So Stu Scheller, I had him on the show. He's the senior advisor now to Pete Hegseth as the Department of Defense secretary. So great guy and very pragmatic, and he got in all kinds of shit for just calling out the leadership as a Marine lieutenant colonel for just failures. And the way he said, he's like, he'd been in Afghanistan numerous times. He's like, the only reason why we're in Afghanistan is because we were there. Guys started to shoot at us, and we said, "Oh, we better shoot back." Okay, well, there's more guys shooting at us. Okay, well, we better bring more guys and shoot back. He's like, there was no strategic vision, and it's just generals were just checking off boxes. Yep, I've been here a year. I did this, and all those lives, all that treasure just wasted. Only went to benefit a few. And so that's why when you have a serious incident like this, where like there's clearly kids being sold into slavery, there's nothing done because like, well, I don't know, we don't really know why we're here, period. Why are we going to take on something else that's really not on our plate? But there's no forethought into thinking like, what do we do if we like occupy this place? This is what we did for 20 years. Do we actually get involved in their politics and actually get involved in their policing? Those are big questions that were never answered, and that's why we ran up against those issues.
Yeah, one would have thought that we would learn a thing or two from the Vietnam War and not repeat all of those same exact things. But I
Yeah.
like the way that you put it that the stuff that fucks you up are the things that outflank you. Like, you were prepared to get shot at. You were probably prepared to lose your friends, maybe even prepared to die yourself. But you weren't prepared to just witness rampant sexual abuse of children and be completely powerless to do anything about it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And because I was a teacher already, so I already had like I worked at YMCA day camps. Like clearly, like I I'm in a good place when I'm educating the
Hmm.
youth,
Yep.
and that brings me joy. I like seeing kids having fun. I like seeing kids when the light bulb goes on when they learn something. Just part of who I am. But so therefore, I make connections with those kids, and you realize like, oh, like imagine this was back home. Like there would be a scandal, would be outrage, right? And it just wouldn't be allowed to happen. But there, because they're in the middle of a war and it's not really part of our mission, it gets swept under the rug. And I think one of the other things too that was really important I didn't mention was I was solo. I was a lone operator. I was one of the only Canadians on a total like a complete American base. So there's 3 different rotations of American units that came through. I never really had a platoon, a section that I was a part of that I could really connect with after the fact. So that was a big failure, in my opinion, by the military, by the army at this point, is that they didn't recognize that there's a component to going to war that requires you to bond and like find your war buddies and just hang out and chat. And like the very few that I have, they're American, and we text from time to time, but a lot of them, they're colonels, and they're not here. I don't get to go have a beer with them. I don't get to chat about things. So
Yeah.
I'm really kind of on my own dealing with this stuff. And that was one of the hardest things, because I just figured, well, I guess that's that. So I'm just going to shut the fuck up and carry on and be a good soldier from that point on after I came home. So, that was kind of one of the hardest things, is just not being able to connect with anybody that was actually there at that time, to just bounce like the shit that I saw off of other people and be like, am I crazy? Like, what's going on here? So that was in my opinion, that was one of the biggest things that kind of left me out, just flapping in the wind, was just I didn't have anybody to bond with.
Did you know that that was an issue as you were going through it, or was that later on as you're back home reflecting and kind of realizing that?
It was only when I got home and started
Yeah.
reflecting. I mean, there's some so there were some cool Canadian cats on the camp that we got to hang out with every day, um, and it was just by virtue of the fact that they were already there when I showed up. So they were doing like electronic counter surveillance and stuff like that. So we got to play Risk and stuff like that. But they were doing something completely different. Like they weren't out on patrol. Like I was on patrol pretty much every day. And I had some guys pop in, and we trained together. But again, we weren't on the ground together. It makes it totally different. I really bonded with the American unit that I was with, the 10th Mountain Division, their 171 Cav unit. They were there for the better part of my tour, but then they ripped out. And so the next two units I didn't really bond with, and I don't talk to any of them. So because of that, you end up kind of with this like hole in your soul almost, because there's nobody to talk to,
Yeah, man,
and
that's
that's
a
been hard.
really interesting point to bring up, that just that played into the traumatization, if you want to call it that. Like that played into how bad it was for you,
Mm-hmm.
because we know. So, for instance, Gabor Mate, one of the things that he talks about is like we're not really traumatized so much by the thing that happens to us as much as being alone with the thing that happens to us, and like not having the support and guidance from people who are supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
helping you to process that. Most of the time, that's, as a kid, getting abused by a parent who's supposed to be the one loving you. But in your instance, just basically seeing all of that and having no one to share that burden with. And
Yeah.
I've definitely heard Jocko talk about this, that one of the differences in like World War II versus Vietnam or modern wars, for example, is, for one thing, you were over there until the war was done. So you were
Yeah.
like with all the same guys until the job was done. And then when it was done, you got on a steamship and it took you a month to come home. As opposed to, I'm sure you had experiences where like, hey, I'm in a village one day and then 24 hours later I'm on R&R in wherever, in like Berlin or back home in Canada or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
completely separated from all the other people that you were with. And in your case, you weren't even with anybody to begin with. That's
Mm-hmm.
an interesting angle. Honestly, I don't know if I've ever really talked about that before with anybody that has gone through that.
Well, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody, except for the very few of us that did this one specific job in
Sure.
Canada, to even like get a glimpse as to what it was like, because there's a handful of us that did this job. All the other little jobs, like there's what called psyops. That
Hmm.
was part of our world, but they rolled out in teams of 4 or 5. So they really bonded. They lived together. They fought together. They had a team. They had their tribe. I never had a tribe. And so, yeah, I mean, that whole idea that, hey, if you don't get to share with anybody, like what Gabor Mate said, like that's the thing that messes you up. That's 100% my my view on things looking back. I'm like, man, I don't think I would have had all the trouble I would have had like post, coming home, had I had a tribe to connect with, because it was, and it reinforced my upbringing as well. Because my upbringing was like, be super like hyper self-reliant, don't rely on anybody emotionally, physically, like just you got to do everything on your own. So I was like, okay, check, like I got to do everything on my own here because nobody's coming to save me. But the thing was, like, my unit, they didn't give two fucks. Like I was really badly injured when I came home, and nobody, I was booking all my own medical appointments, going to doctors and them telling me you're fine, go home. I'm like, what? I'm like, I was just in Afghanistan, and them saying like, why were you in Afghanistan? I just wanted to choke people. Dude, it's so insane. Like they're just like, okay, well, let's get this angry veteran out of here, and they give me Percocets, and they say like, go the fuck. I remember just bawling my eyes out in my car. I'm like, dude, I'm so fucked up. I can't walk. What do I do? Nobody gave a shit. So, and then I have to go on unemployment insurance because I don't have a job anymore. So like I'm bamboozled. I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm like, well, I didn't I didn't lose a limb. I didn't see anybody get blown up. None of my buddies like died in my arms in combat. I guess I'm fine. So shut the fuck up and do your thing now that you're home.
Right.
But the pain and like being unable to process and on top of that, I never talked to Veterans Affairs because they don't reach out unless you reach out. And I had nobody to even guide me to say like, hey, you need to go reach out to Veterans Affairs like right now. It was only because thank God I had a really good commanding officer who'd been deployed. He's like, Dave, are you doing all right? And I was like, things really hurt, man. He's like, did you sign your documents to say you got hurt over there? I was like, no. He's like, here. He's like, write everything up. I'm going to sign it right now. If it wasn't for him, I'd be fucked. I'd be fucked. So thank God for him. So that's Mike Canavan. Shout out to Mike for knowing
Thanks,
like
Mike.
what was up. Yeah.
So hang on, but
And
before we,
it's just being alone, man. It's just being alone. And it took years to figure out like I need to like circle the wagons and get Veterans Affairs on board. And like on top of that, just to finish my thought there, like my wife
mm,
isn't military. She met me as I was deploying. She has no context as to what the hell any of this is. So she didn't even know how to deal. My parents, nobody knew how to deal. So I was just on my own, kind of doing my thing. And all my buddies that were in the military were all deployed or like elsewhere. So, it took a while to kind of build that network back up.
well, yeah, so I want to hear more about that kind of like dark period, if you will, after you got home. But first, like what led to you getting out? Was it this injury? Was it like a med
Mhm.
retirement process, or did you just decide you had enough?
No, 100% is med retirement. So again, you know, if the forces could learn something from what I went through, especially as a reservist, we treat our reservists like homeless people. We want them like to make ourselves feel good. It's
Uh-huh.
like, oh, I'm handing stuff out to a homeless man. Yay, I feel good about myself today.
Right.
But we're
That's funny.
we're just beggars. We don't get like they expect everything from us and then give us nothing. So and on top of that, nobody in the organizations know that all these things exist in terms of supports. So that's a problem. We don't get paid this. So yeah, hey, I'm always talking about like pay equity. Like, well, we don't even get paid the same, but we're doing the exact same job. And then when we come home, we don't get treated the same because we don't have like our battalions don't treat us like we're a battalion. We're part-time soldiers, so we get treated like part-time employees, yet we're expected to do a full-time job and fight for the country and then come home to unemployment insurance. Um, so because of that, we get stuck kind of in the lurch and nobody really gets the coverage that they need. Like I should have been, yeah, I should have been covered essentially because I was injured until my injury was, stable. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And so what happened was my injury just got worse and worse and worse and worse. I wasn't getting, like I said, I was just getting Percocets. And then like I'll go to physio. I didn't know anything that I know now, but because I had to go through all that, because I had to go through the periods where I couldn't walk, the periods where I'm just like, I'm going to work, I'm starting to teach again, and I'm just in agony all day. I went through all that, and it made me realize like there is a way to make things better. Once I started to open up to it and just be accepting that I don't know what I don't know, but having wanted to stay in the military, my goal was to go full time. That's all I wanted. I'm like, this is what I'm good at, man. I freaking love being in war. That's a whole other conversation as to like why I think guys like myself love being in combat. But they didn't want me to stay in. They're like, no, you got to go. I was like, yeah, but is there a way to like find another job? They're like, no, out.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay. So I guess I go back to teaching. And so I was medically retired for physical injuries, like my knee and my back. I still had yet to address the raging psychological issues that were obvious. But to me, I was just like, no, like I'm good. I'm fine. Just carry on. And that, was, I guess, the gift that I didn't realize was a gift then, because now that's led to what we're doing here.
Why, when you say, you hadn't addressed all those raging psychological issues, did you know that that was there and you were just kind of telling
No.
yourself this was fine? Or were you just like, this is normal, this is just who I am, this is how it is?
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
just like, no, this is normal. I've always been this angry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always just thought about like randomly just like choking people to death. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well,
I,
now
ra-
that you train jujitsu, that's normal.
yeah, yeah. Then I was like choking people to death. Now I'm like, ugh, it's just a different way.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't have the perspective because you're in it. And I never had any like mental health training. To touch back on what you said about Jocko talking about World War II veterans coming back on ships and it takes like weeks, right? And just hanging out with your bros.
Hmm.
They tried to do that here in Canada because they recognized guys were literally just in the fight back home. Like, hey kids. So they implemented like a 3-day R&R, like a decompression
Right.
before you went home all angry and pissed off and dusty in Greece, which, like, don't get me wrong, it was fucking fun. This is just a bunch of barbarians in a like 4-star hotel getting free massages and free buffet dinners and like golfing excursions, and we could go to like Nicosia, like we could go to all like the places. There's military police everywhere to like contain the chaos,
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say,
it
I'm
was
sure that town didn't appreciate that.
no, no, no. I'm pretty sure they liked our money, but I'm pretty sure they didn't appreciate our destructiveness. But the Russian mob made out like bandits, so
Hell yeah.
I think everybody got. I think everybody got a little bit a benefit from that. But it was 3 days, right? 3 days, I guess, was better than none.
Right.
And I only got 2 days of flight delays, but it was nice to just kind of like sit and look at pretty things like flowers and like not be surrounded by the stench of death all the time and like jet fuel. So that was nice, but you're definitely not decompressed. You're far from it. And so coming home, I realized I'm like, fuck, I'm numb, man. Like and it was one of my best buddies that drove me home, who had deployed not too long before, had a much rougher tour than me. He's like, you just got to go with it, man. He's like, it's going to take a while, but you just got to go with it. So, like, as I showed up at home, I thought it was going to be emotional. My whole family was there. They had a big barbecue, like, and I showed up and I was just like, oh, cool to see everybody, But I was like, I did have the self awareness to be like, I have no emotion here whatsoever. Like, I'm not happy. I'm not sad. I'm just like numb. So that was the emotion that carried on. With the only other emotion was like rage, just constant, just spikes of rage that I just always had to tamp down. And especially as a teacher, getting back into teaching so early, that was a terrible idea, but I figured, what else am I going to do? Like, I would literally show up to teach high school science and I would be in the shitter just with like chronic freaking like mud butt, just like, and that was every day. And I was like, this is normal. This is normal. Like, like I'm showing up to my new job and I have chronic diarrhea and I'm angry the whole time I'm here and want to murder 16-year-olds. Normal response for a high school teacher. So only until I had somebody is that I can't even remember who told me to reach out. I think it was just my wife being fed up. Like, you got to find a program. You're fucked up. Like, was basically the conversation. And I was like, fuck you. I'm not fucked up. And I was like, maybe I am. I just found a program that took me in for a few weekends. And it really just made me realize, like, talking to actual professionals, be like, dude, you got a lot of shit to unpack here, dude. And I was like, oh, okay. Now
Yeah,
what do I
man,
do?
that's step one, is realizing. It's kind of a cliche, but it's like admitting you have a problem is the first step. What
Yeah.
you shared before of like, I never got blown up, nobody ever died in my arms, right? So I guess I'm fine then, right? Like, other people deal with PTSD, right? The guys who
Yes.
lost a limb from stepping on an IED, they have PTSD, but I must be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that I see with people who never saw combat or who never deployed, and they think that it's almost like they don't deserve to have PTSD. And
Hmm.
that's like, it's like me, man. I used to roll my eyes when people talk about childhood trauma because I was like, I never got hit when I was a kid. I never went to bed hungry. Therefore, I'm fine, right? Like
Yeah.
childhood trauma is something that other people have, not me. I'm good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I distinctly remember realizing that like I had mental health problems, and I was like, oh no, that's something for weak people, and that
Oh,
was like a whole trip by itself. But all right, before we get into like that program and turning things around, again, I want to linger on like the shit for a second because I think it's very easy for people who are in the midst of that right now to look at somebody like you and be like, "Oh, must be nice that he has this really high rated podcast. Must be nice that he has a book out. Must be nice that he's doing so well right now." But like there's nothing fucking different from you and that person right now. And so I like to highlight the shit that you were in to kind of
mm.
demonstrate that. So when you got home, like what kind of stuff were you dealing with? The anger, wanting
Yeah.
to strangle 16-year-old chemistry students, which is not ideal.
No,
After
not a
marriage,
valuable part of the curriculum.
no. Were you were a dad at that point, or were kids not yet in the picture?
2016, my son was born.
How old were
2019, my
you?
daughter. So I was 35.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So, my whole life, I always wanted to be a dad. I remember saying that when I was like a teenager, like, man, I can't wait to be a dad.
Mm.
So for me, being a dad has always been just one of my life goals. So yeah, October 5th, 2016, my son was born. It was awesome. I finally got to like experience joy, like tears. Like it was just, we had a great experience too, because I'm kind of, it sounds like we had similar upbringings. Like I had no like big T traumas growing up, like I wasn't beaten or stuff like that. But no matter who you are, you're going to have things that just affect you, which builds your character. But I had the same approach too. It's like, oh, you need therapy? Okay, loser.
Yeah,
Like, I just always saw it as weakness,
yeah,
just weakness, weakness, weakness. So having to admit that I had some issues was really hard for me. And it was only because I had kids that everything shifted, because I would have just kept on soldiering on had I not had this massive responsibility of raising a new human. That was how I came to realize that I need to do better. And it didn't start like with my psychological issues. It started with my physical ones, because I was realizing that I was going to be a cripple by the
yeah,
time I'm 40
yeah.
if I didn't do something. And I had a really bad flare up at work. Like I literally couldn't walk, so a back flare up.
Mm.
And we had priests in the school, so I had to borrow like their walker. I finished my day teaching just like miserable. And I had to I was doing my master's at the time too. So I had to still get downtown and like do this 100. It was a presentation that was for 100% of my grade. So had to show up. So I show up like all crippled and stuff. They're like, dude, what's the matter with you? I'm like, it's a war injury. Don't worry about it. So they're like, a war? Like even Canadians are like, what war were
A
you in?
war.
I'm like, how do you not know? I'm like, when I say the war, you don't know
Yeah,
what
dude.
war. Anyways, that's a whole other podcast. But so I keep on having these flare ups, and that worst one, like my wife thought I was faking. She's like, you can't be
Really?
this bad. I was I was so bad. I had to call her to come pick me up, like downtown, because we live in the burbs. She's like, oh my god. I'm like, I can't move. I was literally crawling to
Yeah, I
get
believe
myself to
that.
the car. She's like, you're faking. I'm like, I'm in agony right now. This is a 10 on 10. Like, oh shit, like I can't move pain. Um, and so it was then when I was lying in bed and like she had to help me go to the bathroom. Like it was just humiliating. For a week, I couldn't go to work. I remember thinking, I need to fix this because I can't be carrying my son. And then all of a sudden, and I'm stuck. What do I do? Or he's like crawling around in like the park and now I
Yeah,
can't
go get
move.
him. Yeah.
Oh shit, what do I do? So my like survival brain kicked in, and that's when I decided to start working on my physical stuff. And I started working with my coach, and we've been working together for 8 years since then to just figure out, well, what's wrong. And it was just so many structural problems, mainly from the military. But I thought I was good to go because I could run, I could do pull-ups, I could do push-ups, I could ruck march. But overuse injuries for over a decade just caused a shit ton of problems. And the injury that I blew my back out in Afghanistan, never addressed it. That just all just came to a head. And so it took years to kind of rebuild myself physically. But that gave me the space to be able to start focusing on the psychological stuff, which came about a year or two later.
It's kind of neat. I think that it's like the physical wellness was like the thin end of the wedge that
Yeah.
led to opening up all of this and realizing that you need help. And yeah, there's nothing better to do that than having kids. Like I don't even know if you know this. I'm like legally blind in my left eye.
Yeah, you told
And
us the Mexico.
yeah, and I refused, or I just resisted going to see a doctor about it for a very long time until I was playing catch with our neighbor's kid. And I was like, oh, I have zero depth perception. And I was like, this is like we were throwing like a tennis ball or something, so it's fine. But I was like, if this was a baseball coming at my face, this would be problematic. And I was like, if I ever want to play catch with my kids, like I guess I have to go to the eye doctor. And that sucked to just admit that. Because yeah, like literally 2 or 3 years, my eyesight was just deteriorating. And I was like, this is
Mhm.
fine. God graced me with two eyes. My other one works still. So what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Cordy
Good
doesn't like that
rationalization.
logic.
Good
Yeah, 100%.
rationalization. I like it.
Um, so what did it take for you to actually go to that program? You know, you said like your wife was like, "Hey, you're all fucked up," and you're like, "Fuck you, I'm not fucked up."
Yeah.
Why did you actually relent and kind of realize like, maybe I am fucked up?
I just didn't want to be fighting any, like, it was just not, I was constantly fighting with my wife. And I just
Mhm.
didn't want to be this grumpy asshole around my kids. Something was up, and I started listening to podcasts too at that point. I started listening to Jocko. I started listening to Joe Rogan. So my mind started to open, even ever so slightly, to new ideas. I was still very, I was still in that post 20 something year old, early 30s, mid 30s, kind of that arrogance phase where it's like, dude, I got a degree in biochem. I'm working on my master's. I know what's up. Really not applying the whole humility side of, growth and being a human being that constantly seeks out to, I'm an educator. I want people to be lifelong learners, but then I recognize, like, I'm not being a lifelong learner with myself. I just said, no, I know everything. I do CrossFit. I'm good, bro. Like, I'm good. I know. I read the CrossFit Journal. So that arrogance and that ego had to dissolve. And I remember applying for this program. I Everything I found was a Google search because I had nobody supporting me. A lot of guys get out and they get, a package of stuff, and like, this is what you need to do for your retirement. You're medically released. That you do these steps. I didn't. So I found everything just through Google searches. And I kind of thought it was a way to retrain myself to get another job, to find something that I wouldn't be so angry at, because I didn't know what it was at the time, but I guess you would call them a panic attack at work before, like, the schedule was rough. Like, I'll be honest, it was a private school. I love working there, but man, they ground you into dust because you'd have like 4 classes back to back to back and then no breaks. Like, I would have like 4 hours of classes and not have a time to go take a shit. And like, so before like another class would come in, I would have to duck into like the side room and just like box breathe, like, because I was just like, fuck, I can't deal with these guys. I can't deal with these guys. No, 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 you're good. Don't be a bitch. Don't be a bitch. Like, you did helicopter ops. You did helicopter ops. Like, I had to psych myself out to actually be able to go teach 14-year-olds. Something was off, but I was just like, nope, this is just normal. But when I was doing those searches, I was like, well, this would probably be a way to like find something that I might be better at, which is the way I was rationalizing it.
Yeah,
I'd be
yeah.
better at doing something different. And on top of all that, too, I recognize now it's a way to deal with trauma, but I thought I could outwork my trauma. So I was, you know, doing a master's, taking 2 classes, coaching 2 teams at high school level, new dad, basically like a new husband, new house. Yeah, I was volunteering. I was training for the CrossFit Open. I was just like, okay, I'll just be unable to actually be in my own headspace.
That's right. Yeah, I'll fill 100% of this time that I'm not asleep, and therefore, if there's no silence, no quiet time, I can't hear all of the shit that's in my own head.
It's exactly it. And work was so demanding as a teacher. I was just like, okay, well, this is perfect, right? I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. So then I find this course. It's called the Veteran Transition Network.
Mm.
Awesome people. One of the best organizations in Canada, I'll be honest, they're highly rated on like objectively, as you know, a lot of their money goes to the actual veterans. And I have to say, like, it's run out of University of British Columbia. It's a gem, and it's a few weekends. I don't know if they changed their format, but it was 2 or 3 weekends in house, 6 or 7 guys, small group. There's one veteran who's there to like kind of help guide, and then 2 professionals. And it's talk therapy, but in a group. And I was like, I'm going to be that loser reservist, like Afghan vet that like didn't really see that much combat. And I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to be like, this is not for me. But initially I thought we were just going to be talking about how to get a new job. So I didn't really know what to expect until I got on the phone with the psychologist who was like, okay, so we read your application. Yeah, you'd be a great fit. And we noticed like you're experiencing a lot of anger. I'm like, yeah, but you know, like I just don't want it to affect my work. They're like, yeah, we get that, but like, how's it affecting your home life? I'm like, well, how does that have like what does that have to do with work? They're like, well, because we're going to be working a lot on yourself. Myself.
What do
Oh,
I have to
okay.
do with
Like,
anything?
what do I have to do? They're like, yeah, this is a very like intensive like therapy session for like 6 days. I'm like, therapy? I was like, oh, I was like, I remember telling them like, oh no, give this to somebody else that needs it. I'm good. They're like, no, we're calling you because we read your shit. We took your intake. We select people because we have a lot of people that apply. You're coming. Just pack your shit. Like, come on down. I was like, okay. So again, I was kind of apprehensive, but uh, I was the only Afghan vet there, which I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, there's vets from like Africa, Bosnia, like all over the place. And they were looking at me like, oh, this freaking, he thinks he's the cool guy. Like he's the Afghan vet. Like he's the new kid on the block. Like, so I realized we had all these presuppositions and like stereotypes
Right.
about each other,
Yep.
which it doesn't matter. That's what I learned. And I, long story short, we all had to do, like, we all had to walk the room. It took us, you know, 6 sessions for us to all like just share our stories out loud, if we were ready, and literally walk through the room as part of like the like motion, taking action, and talking about your shit at the same time. And everybody's story, like they were harsh, man. Like they were a lot of them were really hard to digest. And then they pulled me aside. They're like, "We notice you're not really here. Like we know there's something there, but you're kind of joking and like you're masking." So, but they told it to me straight. They're like, either you talk or you get the fuck out. Like everybody else is sharing, you're not. So like put up or shut up. It's like, oh fuck. I'm like, when I get put on the spot like that, it's a good way to deal with me. So yeah, I started doing the walk. I started talking, and I'm just like, I'm just a wreck. I've never sobbed in my life until that moment, and I'm just like everything is coming out. The snot, like it's just it's uncontrollable. I'm talking about like the whole experience in Afghanistan, and then all the guys there are just like bawling their eyes out. And at the end of it, in true like army guy fashion, one of the guys is like, Dave, you're such a fucking piece of shit. He's like, look, you even made the psychologist cry. He's like, you motherfucker. And so then afterwards, I went to talk to one of the psychs, and I was like, should I get evaluated? Like, he's like, are you seriously asking me this question right now? I'm like, yeah, but like, we're done. Like, thanks, man.
I'm fine now, right? We're finished.
He's like, ugh. He's like, yes. He's like, I will do your paperwork, but you absolutely need to go talk to Veterans Affairs. You're gonna need to work on this. And that was it. Like that was the confirmation I needed. Like, dude, you made a whole room full of people of like grown ass like hard men cry. That's a pretty brutal story. Go and find your treatment and get healthy. And I was like, okay. So I got the justification, and then that was 2017, I think. And so it's led to these conversations and a whole bunch of other stuff since then.
That's really interesting, man, because in the plant medicine world, we kind of talk about like having a macro dose or like a large experience that kind of cracks things open, and then there's like the integration process. It almost sounds like this is a parallel where you went to this thing, you were kind of resisting it the whole time, but then finally there was this breakthrough, and like all of the walls kind of crumbled, and then you were like, oh, I'm not done. This is actually like everything's just starting from here, really.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. A lot of it still at that point was fear based though, because my concern was like, oh fuck, I'm not going to be able to work. I had to support the family.
Right.
I didn't realize that there were like when they were saying like go do your claim, like go talk to Veterans Affairs. They were literally saying like they will cover you over time to make sure you can get back on your feet. I didn't understand that. So I was just like, oh, but they were calling me about like disability. I'm like, no, 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 I'm not disabled, because if you're disabled, like you can't work. And I was like, no, 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 I need to make like more than $1,000 a month. Like I need to pay the mortgage. I had another kid on the way. I was like, I don't want to be like labeled disabled. They're like, no, 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 like dummy. Like there's a whole program that literally pays you your salary, which they should have told you like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So you can take advantage of it. You're not taking any money from anybody. This is here for you. So once I realized that, like right away, like my claim got like approved, and they're like, yep. So then I was able to do the work, but everything was fear based. I was like, oh fuck, well, if I do this, am I not gonna be able to work? So I was always putting these barriers to my healing, because I was scared that I wasn't going to be able to make enough money, which is
Right.
essentially it. Once I got over that fear, then it was easier to kind of lean into it and do more. But I mean, it wasn't like after that, like it was like rainbows and sunshine. You know, it was like 4 or 5 more years of really grinding and just being in the basement and like wondering like is there any point going on? Like it got fucking dark, right?
Well, so yeah, that was 2017-ish. That was
Yeah.
when you stopped your teaching job?
No, no, I
No?
kept on teaching. I
Oh,
I was like, well, I was like, I don't know what to do. I got to keep on working. I wasn't on a program yet for VAC. I stopped teaching in 2019
okay.
when I just had my daughter, Olivia. And I had a break. Like I just had one of those, like I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I still didn't know that it was really trauma related, or yeah, I was acting irrationally, but it was my central nervous system like forcing me to do something different. I recognize that now.
Well, I was going to
And
say, I imagine that was even harder because one of your coping mechanisms was just to keep yourself too busy to deal with all of this. And then they're here telling you, like, hey, you have to take a step back and we're going to cover the finances. Like, that's okay. But I imagine just that part was really difficult for you. As you
oh,
said, of just
yeah.
being alone in the basement with your thoughts, like, that's kind of where the darkness, like, really creeps in.
Yeah, so I mean like that was so as a teacher, you're always working even on the weekends. You're correcting, like
Yep. Yep.
so I always had something to do. But then 2019, I remember saying like I can't. I'd finished my master's. I had even asked the administration like, hey, I want to be I want to be an administrator. They I wasn't in the it crowd, so they're like not happening. I was like okay. I was like, well then I'm leaving in the summer. Like I'm just not coming
Mm,
back.
mm.
So I found another job in tech, like as a startup with a startup. Total wrong fit, but they made me feel good about myself. They're like, oh shit, you got all these qualifications, we'll pay you like $10,000 more than what you're making as a like teacher here in Quebec, which was like welfare wages. I was like, done. I don't work well with nerds, man. Like super nerds. Like, I was just, this is a bad fit. So within, I think, 4 months, they'd fired me because I was just like, this place sucks. So I just Costanza'd it. Like, I was showing up and just like, I'm like, in my contract, it says like, if as long as I don't quit, I get some. I get at least a small separation pay for like a month or two. I'm like, you're gonna have to fucking fire my ass. So they did, and then I didn't know what to do, and that's when I came up with the brilliant idea to start a company while unemployed, which was the pod. Well, it was actually the training company. So because I was already doing that on the side, so I was helping young guys at my unit get ready for selection, special forces selection, and that was going okay by word of mouth. Like I was charging like $100 a month. I wasn't really charging anything, and I was like, I can make a go of this, and I did, man. Like, and then that's where the podcast came out, and then that's where the book came out. But as you know, like entrepreneurship is really fucking hard, and I was not in a good place. I was in a terrible place. Like I was unemployed. I was on EI. I was just, crushing my savings to pay the mortgage. My wife's on my case. I've got 2 young kids at home. I am panicked. And on top of that, my mental health is just cratering. Like when I'd have good days, I'd be writing, I'd be doing coaching. And then when I have bad days, I'm literally sitting in the basement and wondering, like, is there any reason to go on? I'm literally pushing And I can't remember why I had to do this, but I remember distinctly I dropped my kids off at daycare and I'd walk back with the stroller empty. And the symbolism of that, I remember walking home and I was just bawling my eyes out, like in my neighborhood here, thinking like I used to be a freaking like warrior. Like this is what I am now. I'm this loser pushing an empty stroller back home so that I can go sit in my basement. That was like overwhelming for me. And that took a good year to kind of build myself up. But I realized that I had to do something, or else I would have gone even further down a dark hole. And that was, writing and getting up and just being consistent with the podcast. I did like an episode a week, and keeping me honest with my clients. That was the only thing that kept me going. Uh, Obviously the kids, but like it was more. It was like that was like my kids. I knew were always going to be there, but I had to like ascend and do something more. And so even though it was still just fledgling, I actually had something to actually work on professionally every day, which made me go, oh, okay. Yeah, go send that email. Yeah, go write
Right.
that chapter.
Right.
And I'm glad I created that for myself subconsciously, because it was what saved me and helped me get out of the hole, because I got to talk to really cool people like
Yeah.
you,
And,
and like,
and
it was that like that that need to actually be able to air, I guess, my not my grievances, but my issues with other people that have been through it, that made it a lot easier, even though it was through a screen. So
And maybe that stopped you from ever getting to such a low point. But when you were in that space, wondering, is there any point to go on dealing with all this stress? Did any things enter the picture like alcohol, substance abuse, anything like that to kind of cope, or that was never part of it for you?
no, I mean my family's Irish, so we know about like the whiskey flu. Like the drinking, we had alcoholics in the family like generations ago, and that left a lasting impression on like the next two generations. That like, yeah, I like the booze, but I really basically stopped boozing like once I got back from Afghanistan. So it doesn't serve me. I was getting free weed at that point, but even at that, I don't abuse it. Like during the day, I never really smoke weed during the day, or it was really like a nighttime thing, and it was great for my back, you know, for pain. So no, I never went down the substance route, because I always knew that if I start using a substance to downregulate or to like cope, that's going to be just game over.
Yeah.
That's why I stopped taking opiates. I was like,
Hmm.
I'd rather be in pain.
I wanted to ask you about that. So it sounds like the combination of the family history of alcoholism. So, like, you kind of knew you didn't want to do that,
Yeah,
combined with you always did have some answer to that question of like wondering, is there any point to go on, or wondering what's the point? You had your clients, you had your podcast, you had the book idea to kind of answer that.
yeah.
Because, yeah, I wanted to ask basically, like, why did you not get addicted to pills? Like, I just spoke to this other guy, Billy, who's in our program. Very similar story where like he had physical injuries, got prescribed opiates, and he was like, "Oh, this is nice. This makes all the other problems go away." And then the opiates turned into heroin, which turned into meth. And he's in a much better place now, obviously. But and there's one other guy who just joined our program I just spoke to the other day. Also lives in Quebec, which seems to really just take a toll on people's mental health, just living in Quebec in general.
They're
And
English too. It's even worse.
he was sharing with me that um, if Canada continues going down this path it's on politically, if it gets to a certain point, he would try the MAID option. Like, he basically asked the government to help him kill himself. Like, if the political situation continues to degenerate, and this guy has kids, and it kept coming back to that question of like, well, what's the point of going on? And I told him, like, if our program's gonna work for you at all, it's gonna center around answering that question.
Mm.
But it sounds like for you, even in the depths of it, you had some answer to that question of like, what's the point to go on?
Yeah, I never really was like suicidal. I
Yeah.
was just like, what? I was asking the question like, what's the point? And like I knew I had a point. Like I made these kids, and I was like, I always want to be here for them, but it was more like, what do I do? Like, how did I go from this, like, the pinnacle of my professional career was Afghanistan, and I felt so good when I was there. I was like, fuck, I want this every day. That's why I wanted to make it like full-time career, but my injuries didn't allow me. So I said, well, what do I do to replicate this? Because it's a feeling that you don't get to. I still can't replicate it. And I think that's what a lot of us that were uh, fighting during the Global War on Terror are mourning. We're mourning that person, that ability, the all-out responsibility, where that feeling of, it was probably like what most men felt like 150 years ago, just on a day-to-day. Like, you had to protect your family, you had to carry a sidearm, you had to go, farm, whatever. Like, you had to make sure shit got done. That's how I felt when I was there. Like, I had responsibility. If I fucked up, people might get hurt, I might get killed, I could kill somebody if I had to. These were like, that it made me feel like I'm a man. But you come home and you don't have that feeling anymore, and that was hard to take. But I guess the main thing was, I when I was a kid, I was brought up in the church. That helped. I wasn't praying yet. I wasn't relying on my faith, but I knew that there was this rejection of nihilism that was just foundational to my core. And it was more the search for that meaning again, that I was like, if I'm patient, I think I'll find it, but I wasn't sure. But it was still crushing to my soul to no longer be that important guy anymore, like that cool guy that walked around with a gun all day. And then to not recognize that was like a big part of that I'll never get back. It took a while to work through that, but it was establishing just a series of habits. Like, I understood that at a fundamental level. And I think, thankfully, I have a biochemistry degree. I do understand, like, the inner workings of like what happens to you metabolically when you get hooked on opiates. I just knew, like, these, like, booze and opiates, like, these are the things that are the biggest killers on the planet. Why even entertain them? So I was very rational with that. So when weed came along, I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't really see any signs that this is addictive. But then again, I like being in control, so to speak, during the day-to-day. So I don't like being smashed. I don't like being blasted on weed. I want to be able to, like, take care of myself and my family if I need to, and not just, like, giggle myself to death during during a serious moment. So it's just, I think it's just my upbringing that really helped me just stay very disciplined in that, and be able to go through it and just be accepting at a fundamental level that this will get better.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to go through it, and this is going to be the hardest point of my life. That's it. And I read a lot. Like, that helped too. Like, I'm always reading like 3 or 4 books at a time. So I think having that perspective, and, not being abused as a kid too, probably helped a lot as well. To help me
Were there
build
any
something.
specific books that helped you when you were, like, in that dark period? Are there any that stand out in your mind?
Well, A Man's Search for no, not A Man's Search
Sure.
for, sorry. No, I read
No,
snippets of
fuck
that. I
that
didn't
book.
read I didn't read the whole one. But I read all of Jocko's books. They're really
Okay.
good, based on leadership.
Yeah.
Then I started reading, actually, the book that had one of the biggest influences on me was Rich Dad Poor Dad. A lot of
Hmm.
people shit on it, but that made me realize, oh, I don't understand anything about money. Okay, cool. So I started. Then I read How to Make Friends and Influence People. Cool. Then I read The Intelligent Investor. So I started really, like, wanting to understand money, but that fundamentally made me understand me a lot better, and, like, who I am. Because money is this weird extension of, like, our collective psychology. It's interesting stuff. And then I started Jordan Peterson's books. So 12 Rules. Oof. I remember listening to that on the way to work when I was still teaching, and actually crying. So I was like, oh shit. I was like, what's this doing to me? What's happening? I already had my son. It was just, it really had a profound effect on me. So those would be, like, the biggest ones for me. I'd say, like, Jordan Peterson's books, A Man's Search for Meaning. Just, like, the idea of it was really important. I still haven't finished it completely. Um,
I have a lot of
and
books
also,
like that.
Marcus Aurelius's
Yeah. Meditations?
Meditations. I listened to that over and over again, because I'm
Hmm.
like, this guy was a gangster, like, over 2,000 years ago. This is crazy.
Yeah. I have a lot of books like that where I'm like, I like the idea and I've recommended it to people, but I haven't actually read the book. Yeah,
I'm
I
reading the
get
one
it.
you sent me, by the way.
Yeah,
That's
good. I
my
was gonna
main
ask
one
about
in the
that.
shitter. I do all my reading on the shitter, so I'm reading that
That's
one
a
right now.
very good toilet book, dude. It's
Yeah,
Turning Pro for people listening.
it's like a
Um,
4 or 5 shit book.
yeah.
Like, but, yeah,
um, I used to keep very specifically like a Zen short story book in my bathroom because yeah, it was like you could read like one or two per dump. It was like
yeah,
perfect
yeah,
length. I actually want to go back to something else that you said before because you kind of made a comment of like, oh, it could be a whole other podcast to talk about why guys like me enjoy being in combat. And as you were talking before, it sounded like the real thing about it was that everything you did actually mattered. You know, like you
mm,
were carrying a weapon, you were protecting your people, you were getting things done, you were having an impact, as maybe as small as it might be, but you felt like the things you were doing actually mattered. And then I hear this from a lot of people where life made more sense when they were overseas, or everything was easier when they were on deployment. Because now you come home and you got a mortgage and you got bills and you have to go to this job and you're like, well, if I don't show up at this job, nothing really actually fucking happens except I don't get paid. So like,
yeah.
why am I doing this? So is that kind of the sense that you got of like why combat was better, or what do you think like when you say why guys like me enjoyed being in combat so much? What's that about?
Yeah, it's the most primal expression of our genes that I could possibly recreate.
Mm,
I volunteered to go because I knew I needed this experience. I didn't know what it was going to entail, but I knew it was going to entail something. I read Hemingway, like it's kind of like what he wanted to do, right? He wanted to he volunteered to fight in the Spanish Civil War. Like why would you do that? Well, it's because he fundamentally wanted to experience one of the most human things, in my opinion, and in his opinion, that you can do. And warfare is that chaotic, primal, like final expression of the exacerbation of like all political will in violence. We're violent. Like that's just who we are. And we try to suppress it here so much. We try to suppress the fact that we are a violent species.
100%.
We love killing.
And we're only
And
here because our ancestors excelled in violence.
yeah, or excelled in avoiding it at all costs. But
Yeah,
at some
yeah.
point, some ancestor had to break some necks. Um, and I embrace it. Clearly, I joined a profession that like violence is the most important thing. And I think because we don't get to express it here, and I mean like Canada, U.S., as like part of who we are. Americans, you guys definitely embrace it a lot better than Canadians do. We only embrace it in hockey, in my opinion. Like
Yeah,
hockey
yeah.
is the only like true, and so of course it comes under attack by like the lefties and stuff like that. But yeah, like the expression of masculinity, like you can see it on the on the rink. And I love playing hockey. I love punching guys in the face. But um, if you don't get to ever do that or have that feeling that like, man, I'm fucking important right now, like I don't I think that's a big cause of like malaise, depression, whatever you want to call it for a lot of men. Like I see a lot of guys that like we weren't in the military, like dads, I'm just kind of like I'm like, man, I get to I had the privilege of like having my life on the line, like having rifles pointed at my chest, having rockets being shot at me. I never felt better. Like that adrenaline surge, that feeling of like I survived. Holy fuck, that was cool. I don't know. Like it's just it's such a primal feeling. And to know that like I could take a life and like I didn't, but it it's something that switches on a gene. I think that's all there for pretty much every guy. And if you don't get a chance to, jujitsu is like a proxy, right? It's dangerous, like fuck, you're getting choked. You feel like you're gonna die. You could. As close as it kind of gets. And unless you have an event for that at some point, I think it keeps you a bit small. So you have to find that aggressive, violent thing as a man at some point. And I found it, and then it was just like taken away so quickly. I was like, no way, I think I really like this. I want to keep on doing it. No, gone.
That was
So I
taken
got a
away
glimpse.
against your will too,
I
with
got
the
a
med
glimpse. I got a
retirement.
glimpse. Yeah, but
Yeah.
then again, there's no other real wars for me to go to. I would have had to have become special forces. My body was beat up. I don't know if it would have been a thing. So I mean, all things happen for a reason, and I gotta realize that I had a really great time. I got to appreciate something that most men don't get to do anymore. and express that on like podcasts and stuff like that, and share whatever.
Well, and I think that now you've also, so, all right, so you're not doing that anymore, but you still are not only like sharing those stories, but you're engaging in a creative process. This is something that I think about a lot, is like the ratio of our creation versus consumption. And the modern man is like 100% in consumption mode. Doom
That's a good
scrolling,
point.
watching TV, even like reading books and podcasts, that's good, but you're still consuming other people's ideas. And there's not maybe that element of violence inherent in this, but what you were sharing about being in combat, it sounds like a wholly creative endeavor where you are going out and like taking action each day that has real consequences. So, jujitsu, yeah, it's not life or death, but it's still creative. And even if we're not expressing violence, I think that capacity to create something new, I think that that's at least part of what you're saying with like being in combat is the closest thing that we can get to what it was probably like, 400 years ago to be alive, where it's just like you got to do shit every day or else you're going to, not survive the night.
Hmm.
So it's, I don't know. I think about that a lot. Like, how can we access a little bit more of that? And it's certainly something that you have figured out with your podcast and with your book and with training and everything that you're doing entrepreneurially. It's
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Blood Meridian?
No.
I think you'd like that a lot. It's a good book. You talk about Hemingway's making me want to revisit For Whom the Bell Tolls. I remember reading that in high school, and
Yeah.
it also made me want to go be a soldier.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's exactly what I was referencing.
yeah,
For whom the bell tolls.
yeah, dude,
Well,
good,
Dave, you're
good
my
stuff.
you're my librarian, so just send me another book. Just send me.
No, man, it comes with one free book per enrollment in the
Just one
program.
free. Okay. At least I know. Thank you.
For real though, we like to send people like a journal or a book or something like that. So yeah, you've hit your quota. Um, all right, man. Honestly, I feel like we haven't even hit on the majority of the things that I figured we would talk about. Like the your whole thing of like killing the fat kid and getting into the whole
Oh
track that
yeah.
you're on now and the plant medicine and the retreat and the microdosing and all this kind of shit. But honestly, we've been going for over an hour already. So I think it's kind of cool if we kind of put a pin in it here. And this is like the lead up. Dave's early life, military experiences, getting out, leading up to basically where you're at now, the other side of this transitional period. So if that's cool with you, I think that's what we should do. So on
Yeah.
that front, what else do you think is pertinent to the story, kind of leading up to the phase in which you killed that old identity and embraced this new one? What else
Yeah.
contributed to that?
Well, if you haven't fallen asleep yet and still want to tune in, it gets good. This is the good part. Yeah. Um, so you mentioned killing the fat kid. That's always been in the back of my mind. That has been one of my driving forces
Because you hate fat kids, you want to murder
because I
them.
hate fat kids. 'Cause I
Yeah, dude, they
fundamentally
take
hate
up so much
gay
space.
fat kids. I want
Yeah.
gay fat kids to not be here. Yeah. Please don't clip that out and put that on Instagram. No, the the fact that I was chubby growing up, and now I realize if 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 that level of like chubbiness was like in like just like normal, like I wasn't chubby, which is crazy when you like compare like apples and pears or whatever my analogy is going. I think you guys understand. I wasn't like obese.
Yep.
I was port. Like
Thick.
I was big. I was thick. I had like I could grab a
Husky.
good, yeah, I could grab a good like hunk of belly fat. And like jiggle it a little bit.
Insulation, bro. You're up north. You need it.
Yeah, well, I mean, my friends, God bless them, man. They called me Dave the Polar Bear Morrow, and that's why I could stay in the pool longer because I was covered in blubber. I was
That's
like,
right.
thanks, guys. Thanks, appreciate it. I talk about it in my book. I go into in depth into like the game that they invented called Medusa Tits. We're very cerebral kids, man. Very cerebral kids. Like we did a lot of reading. Like for a 9-year-old to reference Greek mythology like that,
In a
that was
fat kid insult,
in a
nonetheless.
fat kid insult. There's a reason why my friends are all like working for the UN and like doing all kinds of cool shit, and I'm here doing podcasts.
That's awesome.
Is what it is. But that being said, it was just that part of the reason why I joined the military was because I wanted it to be lean and fit. I always wanted to be super fit, and so there's that fear of like not being wanted, which is like the bad side of it, because that's obviously something that I'm still working on. Like, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this because I want to prove to people that I'm not a fat kid, or that I'm worthy of like their attention or their love? Like in my wife, I'm like, it's like, hey, she's like, I don't care if you have abs, Dave. Like, we're good. I'm like, yeah, but check it out.
Wouldn't you like me more?
Yeah, would you like me more? Yeah. And then building on that, it has definitely kept me disciplined, because the bad thing is, like, I'm hard on myself, and it can be a little bit counterproductive. But on the positive side, like, I know, like, I as identity comes, like, I am a fit and strong human being. That is what I believe fundamentally. Like, I'm an Iron Man. Like, I can do these things. And so I've just built a whole other professional identity around those facts, and share them as much as humanly possible to help inspire others, especially veterans that have had similar experiences to me. But then when they come home, they can't figure out why they can't get the car in gear. Like, it's just, why is shit not working? This is what I used to do in the past. Yeah, exactly. That's what I used to do in the past. And it's establishing those new habits and getting you folks healthier, that for me, especially in the veteran population, where I believe we're completely untapped in terms of human potential. We need more of us doing really great shit, but you can't achieve your greatness if you're physically unwell and dealing with physical limitations that you could probably get cleared out if you were aware that they're healable and curable. And that's been my journey for the last 4 years or so.
When did you become aware that like the self-definition piece was important? Like what you said of like, I'm an Iron Man, I'm an athlete, I'm a capable person.
Yeah.
Because I have to imagine that's not how you were feeling when you couldn't walk because of your injuries.
No.
So, and even when you were Medusa tits back as a kid, right?
Oh man,
So,
brutal. Still affects me, man. Still affects me.
yeah.
So, side note, uh, I I actually had gyno, so gynecomastia, when I was a
Hmm.
kid. I didn't know, like, I didn't know it was a medical condition. It was, my hormones just went burp up, and so, like, I have a weird uh set of nips. They're just big, they're fat. And I didn't know that you can not, like, you can't really get rid of them with bench press and push-ups. They'll always be there unless you do I only found this out like 3 years ago, by the way. So I joke that, hey, when I really make it, and like maybe the kids are out of the house, like, me and my wife will get our tits done, So anyways, it's an aside. It's some content for later. But to answer your question, sorry, what the question again was? I got caught at sea.
The question was, which comes first, the surgery for the micro penis or the man boobs?
Yeah. Oh, definitely tits. Definitely tits.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes sense. No, the
yeah.
question was, when did you get that awareness of like the
Oh, right.
self definition having an impact there?
Right. It was when I started doing my business coaching training, when I started to, like,
Mm.
because I value education. So I started going to entrepreneurship, online entrepreneurship. I didn't know shit about shit. So I had to go learn. So I pay for education. I want to go faster rather than just like beat my head against a wall. So I went to Spain for a 3-day seminar for online entrepreneurs, because online coaching at that point, like 2018, 2019, was kind of new.
Yeah, 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 totally.
Nobody was really doing it. Like, I've
Because,
talked to people like, you do it online, and COVID hadn't hit yet. So people were like,
hmm,
okay. And then I realized, why are you guys all focusing on, like, me, like, and like personally, like, how we need to be better, and like, you need to read this book, you need to read this book, you need to, like, do better. God, that doesn't make no. I just want to sell stuff. So, like, yeah, but you can't sell if you fundamentally don't level yourself up. Your business is only you right now. So if you're not good, your business isn't good. So, like, put two and two together. So that's when I realized that I really had to identify as, I'm an entrepreneur if I want to make this work. So what do entrepreneurs do? They get up and do the boring shit. They write the emails. They do the stuff in the background that people don't see. They DM people all day. Like, that was what it was in like 2018, 2019. You got to build your audience. Well, nobody follows you, bro. So ask them to follow you. Oh, okay. Okay, I can do that. That was like 2 years of just like grinding. And
So, finish my last thought about my identity, and hopefully the internet does crap out. So my identity as an entrepreneur was the best subconscious decision I made moving forward, because I assume the identity of a problem solver. So if I have an issue with my mental health, I can fix this because I'm an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurs we're just bringing in resources, right? And I did this in the military too. When there's a problem, you bring in your ats and debts, as we call it, your attachments and detachments. You don't just solve your mission by yourself. That's retarded. But it's like we get out and we just assume like, well, I got a problem, I'll figure it out on my own. Like, no, you got to bring all your specialists and build your team. And so then once I did that, like the Ironman was the next thing that I wanted to conquer, but it was a lot easier because I'd become an entrepreneur. I was becoming an entrepreneur. So I knew, well, I need a plan. Who's going to make the plan? So I had my coach make my plan. I couldn't do the event. Because of COVID, they canceled it like 2-3 months before. I was like, fuck. So I had to build a team that helped support me on the actual course that I had to invent around Montreal. So all these things could have potentially been like huge roadblocks or just not allowed me to do the Ironman. But I was like, no, it's just an extra challenge I get to overcome. So it really changed how I thought about things, where every challenge is not the end of the world. It's like, hey, I get to go through another challenge. That's cool. And they might suck a lot, but at the end of the day, I feel that every challenge has a solution. So you're just challenged to actually find that solution, which is what entrepreneurs do. So the identity piece has been important to help me with my growth. So I fundamentally believe I'm an entrepreneur. I was a soldier, but it's like I have the identity of like veteran now, not soldier anymore. Letting that go is really important as well. Like I'm not fighting in Afghanistan. I don't intend to really pick up arms again. But that's just, the nature of being a human being. You have to shift your identities. If not, you're not going to be a happy person, in my opinion.
Agreed, man. I we'll get more into this on round 2, but I think that fundamentally what plant medicine does is it helps people to shed old identities and author a new one for themselves.
Yeah.
So before your internet craps out again, let's leave it here for today. We'll stay tuned for round 2. Dave, where can people find more of your shit? So you got your book, it's on Amazon.
Yep.
Harden the Fuck Up. We got our podcast, Hard to Kill Podcast with Dave Morrow.
Mm-hmm.
What else can people check out?
Yeah, if they go to hardtokill.org, just spell it all out. Everything's there. So if you want to follow my socials, if you want to find my book, you can just go to one spot. It's super easy. You can sign up for the mailing list too, and you can get updates for the podcast. And anytime I'm putting out some new stuff, you can find more out there. You can also join the coaching community too. So if you're listening to the podcast, it's really geared for people that are like listening to the podcast and want to do a little bit more in terms of fitness, health, nutrition, mindset, all that stuff, and just have deeper conversations. That's my Veterans Getting Fit AF community. Again, you can find that on my website. And you become a paying member, and you can get to ask questions before podcast guests come on, and I ask them directly on the show, depending on what questions you ask and stuff like that. So it gives you a little bit of play in the arena.
That's actually really cool because you've had some super high profile folks on that show lately.
Yeah,
I mean, pretty fucking legit.
Yeah, the last one, Dr. Peter McCullough, was pretty high profile. The funny thing is, the high profile guests don't get the most views. I don't understand the internet. So I was like, this is going to blow up. It's got like it's just under 1,000 right now. Oh, that's weird. But I talked to a lawyer, Catherine Christensen, and that'll get me 250,000. Wow. I don't know. But either way, the podcast is going great, and it's getting a lot more traction. And it's because folks are tuning in and wanting to actually learn more and expand their horizons and change their identity a little bit more. And that's the point of the show, is to hopefully get people just to open up a little bit and understand that there's a bigger world out there than what you're being presented, especially if you're in the Veterans Affairs healthcare system.
All right, Dave. Thanks very much for your time, man. Thanks for being a part of our program. Thanks for coming to our retreats.
Yeah, man.
Most importantly, thanks for being my friend.
Hey, man. It's easy. It's easy being your friend. So,
man, Dave. Thank you.
No worries.
Peace out.
Cheers.
All right, guys, that's a wrap for this episode of the Plant Medicine for PTSD podcast. As always, thank you so much for your time, your attention. Thank you for listening. If you really enjoyed anything that Dave had to say here, definitely stay tuned for part 2, where we'll cover all of his experiences in our microdosing program, as well as his experiences at our jiu-jitsu retreat down in Mexico. Now, actually, on his podcast, I know he shared a little bit about those experiences already. So I definitely encourage you to give that a listen. It's the Hard to Kill podcast. You can find that, find his book, find more at his website, hardtokill.org. And on there, you'll also find links to donate to the foundation for his micropenis surgery. So I'm sure he would appreciate that as well. All right, as always, thank you very much for your time, your attention. Thanks for listening. Peace out. Hare Krishna.